3 years, 4 months, and 11 days. That was how long Tanya Morris had been working toward the senior brand director position at Crestwell Marketing Group in Nashville, Tennessee. Every performance review exemplary. Every client retention metric above target. A portfolio that had grown the firm's healthcare division by 34% in 18 months. When her coworker Brad Tillman walked into her supervisor's office on a Thursday afternoon, presented a strategy deck that used Tanya's own work product, language, and proprietary client research without attribution, and received the promotion offer the following Monday morning. Tanya found out when Brad sent the team a celebratory email. She did not reply to the email. She opened a new document. She began typing. When Steve Harvey learned the full story on the Family Feud stage 11 months later, including what happened to Brad Tillman in the 14 weeks that followed, he pressed both palms on the podium and said, in a voice that the studio heard as a single controlled exhale, "Yours. It was always yours." What came after that sentence? The phone call, the announcement, the foundation, and the moment Brad Tillman's former supervisor testified before a corporate ethics board would be seen by 231 million people and cited in 3 separate employment law journals as a landmark case in workplace intellectual property protection. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late July, 11 months after the Monday email, when the Morris family walked onto the Family Feud stage in Atlanta. Tanya, her husband Leonard, her sister Deborah, Deborah's husband Antoine, and Tanya's college mentor, Dr. Patricia Webb, 71, who had driven from Memphis, because when Tanya had called her to say she was going on Family Feud, Dr. Webb had said, "I'll be there." She had not asked why. She had just said she would be there, the way she had said it 21 times in 22 years since Tanya was her student. Steve noticed Dr. Webb immediately. Her posture, her hat. The particular expression of a woman who has been watching someone she believes in for a very long time and is not surprised to be in a room that confirms it. Steve said, "Ma'am, who are you to this team?" "Doctor," Webb said, "I taught her everything she did with." Steve said, "Ma'am, you may be the most important person here." "Doctor," Webb said, "I know." The audience loved her immediately. Tanya had the composed, purposeful bearing of a woman who had spent 11 months doing something precise with her anger and had succeeded. She laughed at Steve's jokes. She was good at laughing at things that were not the things she was thinking about. She had been doing it for 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days, and then 11 months more, and she was very good at it now. But Dr. Webb, from the family section, watched Tanya's hands at the podium and noted, as she had noted things about Tanya for 22 years, the way her left hand rested flat, pressed down, steadied, when she was holding something larger than the conversation. Nobody else in that studio would have noticed. Dr. Webb noticed. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Tanya Morris had started at Crestwell Marketing Group as an associate brand manager at 28, after 5 years at a smaller firm where she had built, from scratch, a client services protocol that the firm still used. She had come to Crestwell because it was bigger, because the healthcare division was underperforming and she knew she could fix it, and because the hiring manager had said in the interview, "Tanya, we need someone who can build something." She had built something. The healthcare division's client retention rate had been 61% when she arrived. 3 years in, it was 89%. She had written the retention strategy herself in a document she kept on her personal drive, updated it quarterly, and had presented it to the division head twice, once at the 18-month mark and once at the 3-year review. Brad Tillman had been hired 6 months after Tanya as an account manager in the general brand division. He was charming, socially fluent in the way that the office's social architecture rewarded, and had produced, in his 2.5 years, competent work that had never been described as exceptional. He and Tanya had shared a project in the second year, a cross-divisional campaign that Tanya had led and Brad had contributed to. In the course of that project, Brad had had access to Tanya's shared drive folder for the campaign materials. He had also, she later confirmed, accessed her retention strategy document, not the campaign folder, but her personal strategy folder, which she had not realized was visible to project collaborators at the permission level Brad had been given. She confirmed this when she opened the strategy deck Brad had presented to the supervisor. She had it in her hand 11 minutes after the promotion announcement email arrived. She compared it to her own document. 17 of Brad's 22 strategy slides used language, frameworks, and client insight categories that she had developed and documented over 3 years. She did not panic. She opened a new document. She began typing. She typed for 3 hours. She produced a 61-page comparison document with time-stamped version histories, access logs pulled from the shared drive's audit trail, and a chronological record of every client meeting, internal memo, and email in which she had originated, developed, or presented the concepts Brad had used. She sent it to her personal email. She saved it to a personal external drive. She called Dr. Patricia Webb. Dr. Webb listened to the whole thing. She said, "Do you have an employment attorney?" Tanya said, "I'm calling one tomorrow." Dr. Webb said, "Tonight." Tanya said, "It's 8 o'clock." Dr. Webb said, "Tonight?" Tanya, she called an attorney that evening. The attorney reviewed the 61 pages over the following 48 hours and told Tanya it was among the most thorough documentation of intellectual property theft in a workplace context she had seen in 14 years of employment law. She filed a formal complaint with Crestwell's HR and legal departments within the week. Crestwell's legal team reviewed the complaint. They reviewed the audit logs. They reviewed the version histories. They had Brad Tillman in a meeting within 11 days of the complaint. The meeting lasted 44 minutes. Brad Tillman resigned the following morning. The position he had held for 8 days was vacated. The promotion was reevaluated. Tanya Morris was offered the senior brand director role 6 weeks after the complaint was filed. She accepted. Her first act in the role was to restructure the shared drive permissions for the division, requiring explicit documented consent for any cross-team access to personal strategy folders. She told Leonard everything from the beginning. He had known something was wrong from the Monday email. She had shown it to him without comment, and he had read it and said, "What are you going to do?" She had said, "Document it." He had said, "When do you need me?" She had said, "When I'm done." He had said, "I'll be here." He had been there. Every evening of the 3 weeks she spent building the 61 pages, he had put food on her desk and gone to bed when she told him to go to bed, and said nothing that wasn't useful. He was the right person for her. She told their daughter Imani, 5 years old, nothing directly. But Imani noticed her mother at the desk for 3 weeks. One evening she had come into the study and looked at Tanya and said, "Daddy, did your friend take your prize?" She was asking Leonard. Leonard had looked at Imani, then at Tanya. Tanya had looked up from the screen. She said, "Imani, it wasn't my friend. And it's not gone. Mama's getting it back." Imani had said, "Okay." She had gone back to her cartoons. Leonard had looked at Tanya. Tanya had said, "I'm fine." He had said, "I know." She had gone back to typing. She applied to Family Feud because Leonard had suggested it the week after she received the promotion, the real one, as a celebration. She had said yes because she was ready to celebrate. She was 11 months out from the Monday email and the 61 pages and the resignation, and she was a senior brand director, and her division's retention rate was now 91%. And she had something to celebrate. She came to Atlanta to celebrate. She was also going to tell the truth. Steve Harvey would later say it was the most efficiently delivered act of justice he had ever witnessed on his own show. The game was midway through round 2. A question. Name something a coworker might steal from you. Tanya hit the buzzer. She said, "A promotion." The board flipped. Number 1 answer. The audience applauded. Steve looked at her. He said, "That answer had a history." She said, "It has 61 pages of history." Steve said, "Start from the beginning." She told it. All of it. The 3 years and 4 months and 11 days, the audit logs, the 61 pages, the 44-minute meeting, the morning resignation. She said Dr. Webb's name. She said her attorney's name. She said Brad Tillman's name, clearly, factually, without venom, the way you say the name of a fact. When she finished, she said, "I want people to know that the 61 pages were the whole thing, not the anger, the documentation." 300 people stopped breathing at the same moment. The room held its breath. Steve Harvey stepped back from the podium. He placed his hands flat on it. He looked at Tanya for a long moment. Then he said, "No game. No network. This room." He held up his hand toward the producer. "This has never happened. A woman coming onto this stage with 61 pages that she built in 3 weeks and taking back what was hers. This has never happened." He paused. "Let me tell you something. I made a promise. I promised God that if He got me out of nothing, I would spend the rest of my life helping people who were doing the right thing and getting buried for it." Tanya Morris was not buried. She documented. And then she used those 61 pages like the 61 pages were the tool. Because they were. He looked at her directly. He said, "Yours. It was always yours." He wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and called a business school professor at Vanderbilt University, a contact he trusted, and asked him to connect Tanya Morris with the university's Workplace Equity Center for a keynote invitation, and to establish a $75,000 graduate fellowship in workplace documentation and equity, funded by the Harvey Foundation, in Tanya's name. He ended the call. He announced both families, the Morrises and the competing family, the Robinsons from Atlanta, were leaving with the full $20,000. The Robinsons crossed the stage. Their daughter, 24 and 6 months into her first professional job, walked to Tanya and said, "Can I ask you something?" Tanya said, "Anything." The girl said, "How do I start the document?" Tanya said, "Open a file. Put today's date. Write what happened today." That's step 1. The episode aired 6 weeks later. 231 million views. The hashtag 61 pages one trended for 8 days in 16 countries. Brad Tillman's name was not mentioned in the episode's summary. Tanya had chosen not to include it in her Family Feud segment, saying the story was about the 61 pages, not about him. He was mentioned by name in the employment law journals that cited the case, and in the Crestwell Internal Ethics Board hearing that followed, at which Tanya's supervisor, who had offered Brad the promotion, was required to testify about his review process. The supervisor was not terminated, but was required to complete a mandatory unconscious bias certification and placed on a performance improvement plan. 3 months after the taping, Dr. Webb attended Tanya's first major presentation as senior brand director. She sat in the front row. When Tanya finished, Dr. Webb stood up first. Tanya saw her stand and said, "Dr. Webb, you don't have to," Dr. Webb said. "I taught her everything she did with. I'm standing." A year after the taping, the 61-page document was cited in a Harvard Business Review article on intellectual property protection for Black professionals in corporate environments. The article described it as a model of systematic self-advocacy. Tanya printed the article. She put it in a binder. She labeled the binder Section 12. Today, the Overdue Recognition Fund, named for what Tanya called the promotion in an interview the month after the episode aired, provides legal consultation, documentation support, and professional advocacy for Black employees facing workplace theft of intellectual property and promotion fraud. Its motto, taken from what Tanya told Steve backstage when he asked what advice she'd give to someone in her situation, is, "Open a file. Put today's date. Write what happened." That's step one. The fund has supported 980 employees across 24 states and has contributed to 41 formal workplace complaints and 12 employment board hearings. If Tanya's 61 pages and Dr. Webb's front row standing ovation moved you, subscribe and hit that thumbs up. Share this with someone who needs to know that documentation is power and that what is yours cannot be permanently taken if you are willing to prove it. Have you ever had to fight to reclaim what you built? Let us know in the comments. And ring the notification bell for more stories about the people who do the work and hold the receipts.